Hi, this is Jeff Cassman with Catholic Men of America, and today I have with me Cameron Arcidi. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
We got some great things to talk about, but first, as always, I want to get into your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your faith, family growing up, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I am Catholic. My parents split when I was two. My mom is atheist, agnostic, whatever you want to call it. My father is more of a Catholic in name only. I saw my dad once every 4 weeks based off their custody agreement. And he always made sure that like we went to church and all that stuff. A big part of it, as I think more to annoy my mother than anything else. He gave me a scapular when I was 4 years old and said, if you die and you're not wearing the scapular, you will go to hell. So I was petrified beyond belief. My mom obviously hated the whole situation. Um, my father, God bless him, obviously poorly catechized. When I ended up moving down to New Hampshire to live with my father full time, there were some familial issues there, and I haven't seen him in years. So when I came back to live with my mother in high school, I pretty much associated the faith and all the negative aspects of the faith with my father. So I left the faith. I was baptized and confirmed when I lived with my father in the short 2 years I was with him. But then when I came back to Maine, I pretty much let that go. And then in my early 20s, I started a reversion back. I always told myself like, okay, that there has to be some sort of universal truth or of universal morality, because this is back when all the transgender stuff was first hitting the news and stuff. And I was like, I know that this is wrong. The answer can't be Catholicism, so I need to find a reason, because Catholicism is bad because my dad wasn't the best. And of course, the more research I did, the more I was like, well, shoot, I guess I just have to become Catholic again and do this for real. So I've been devout ever since.
Wow, you covered a lot of ground there. So, what's your relationship with your parents like today?
I have a very good relationship with my mother. Um, she lives just, you know, a hop and a skip and a jump away. We live in rural Maine. She's still, atheistic, agnostic, but she doesn't give me a hard time about my faith. At least not like she used to. My father, I haven't seen in 4 years. I tried to make amends with him and just say, hey, this is me extending the olive branch, and it went south very quickly. So I was able to close that chapter of my life and move on from there.
How did a Catholic and an agnostic or atheist come together in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question. My father is a prominent figure, and I'll leave it at that. My mother was a waitress, and they kind of met when he was a patron at a restaurant, begged her to take him out, uh, and so they went out for a very brief time. Um, and I was the surprise that came of that. So they were never married or anything like that. They were engaged, kind of more from pressure from my father because my mom was pregnant, and then my mom left New Hampshire and came to Maine shortly after I was born. So it was not I wouldn't call it a match made in heaven. It's a good thing they're not together.
Yeah, when you talk to enough people, you realize that, and I'm sure you've had this experience, that there really aren't any perfect families,
Right.
and and a lot of times, especially among practicing Catholic families, you can kind of have this romantic notion of the family, and you just know that your own family is not perfect in whatever ways, and you just start to assume that other people's families are perfect and that somehow your family is messed up, and then you get old enough and you realize that's just not the case. I mean, we're all sinners walking around, and you start putting sinners together, especially if they're unequally yoked, right, with faith and other cultural differences, then there are bound to be problems.
Yeah, and the beauty of the Old Testament, especially when exploring the genealogy of Christ, is like Christ came from a very broken family lineage, and it's through that broken lineage that we have that redemption. So, see, we obviously want to strive for perfection, but to give ourselves the grace to say, are my grandkids gonna scowl at me because of past mistakes that I've made? It's like, well, Christ himself was a descendant of some not so great people. So it's good to keep that in the context that we are imperfect beings, and that's okay.
Amen for that. So you came from an interesting background. You learned a lot of lessons. You got serious about your faith at some point. Tell me about your adult experiences, education, career, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So college to be a teacher. My mom was a teacher. She still is a teacher. I really wanted to teach either middle schoolers or high schoolers, and I wanted to teach civics and history. So I went to school for that. I ended up teaching adults for a little bit. I did adult education as a job. I got my first business I ever founded was my senior year in high school, called Cam the Hot Dog Man, and I had a little hot dog cart, and I went all around the state, and I'd sell hot dogs, and it got me through college without debt. I entered the public school system to start my career with that, and I very quickly learned that the public school system was not some place where I wanted to be, where I wanted to teach, anything like that. So thinking about, well, where can I really have more control over my surroundings and not have it be like this super woke environment. So I ended up transitioning to law enforcement, and I spent 7 years in law enforcement. Um, I over the course of that law enforcement career, I flirted with financial coaching at least part-time, just because I'm a very staunch, like, I don't use debt. I want to be out of debt. I want to be free to invest how I want, spend my money how I want, without being shackled to all these different constraints, being able to give charitably the way that I want. So I got my financial coaching credentials while I was still in law enforcement, and it wasn't until I left law enforcement 2 years ago that I leaned on those credentials more, and I started doing my job full time.
Well, I bet your experiences in law enforcement have really been extraordinary. You see the worst of people. You see probably the unexpected best of people. There's a lot of, I'm sure you saw a lot of moral challenges and difficulties in your own job, as well as in their lives of the folks that you come into contact with, in the lives, of course, of your colleagues. Right, that's a tough, stressful job, whatever aspect you look at it from. Any thoughts you've taken into your life and your post law enforcement career about all those experiences?
Absolutely. As I was promoted in my law enforcement career, one of the big things that I always pushed was involvement with the faith, the idea of redemption for those who are incarcerated or are involved in the criminal justice system, and being able to pivot that sort of experience of making sure that people are being held accountable, but also giving them the nurturing that they need, sometimes the hand up that they need, to be able to regain control of their situation. On one hand, regain control of the things they can control, but relinquish control of the things that they can't. And being able to mesh that together to actually push them forward, align themselves with what God's calling them to do.
All right, so you left law enforcement 2 years ago. Tell us what you're doing now.
Now I run my company, the Debt Slayers of St. George. I run it full time. It's just me, myself, and I. I'm able to help Catholics slay their dragon of debt, and where that moniker comes from, where the Debt Slayers of St. George comes from, is when you look at old maps in the Middle Ages, you'll see, like, here there be dragons, because if we didn't know that something was there. We've sent explorers off there and they've never come back. Well, they just said, well, obviously there's something dangerous, so we want to keep people away from there. Here there be dragons. When we're talking about debt and when we're talking about our experience with managing debt, a lot of times it creates a pit in the stomach of the people who I'm working with, and they'd rather, ignore it, hope the problem will go away on its own. Well, when facing something like that, the more you kind of kick the can down the road, the worse it gets. So being able to identify, here's what your dragon is. It's this debt, it's this debt, it's this loan, it's this spending habit. Being able to identify it, come up with a comprehensive battle plan to then be able to slay your dragon and be able to release the shackles of debt that you find yourself in. So I'm able to help people with that, learn how to be more self-sufficient. I do have a small hobby farm that I'm able to supply stuff for myself and my dog to eat, and also sell a little bit on the side, which is very helpful, and just increase reliance on self and less of the government.
So let's take a little tangent here, a little turn off the main road about the farm. So tell us what you've got and what you do, and maybe some of the experiences you've had with that. Did you grow up, first of all, did you grow up living on a farm doing those kinds of things?
So I would say I grew up farm adjacent. In rural Maine, my family has like a lot of land that has been formerly used as farms, kind of like the artist formerly known as Prince. It's the area formerly used as farms. So we always grew up with a very heavy farm culture. My father was the complete opposite. When I was with him, I lived right next to the train tracks. It was a very, very urban environment. But even up in Maine, we still had like a bunch of woodlots and stuff. So it was very much about that self-sustainability. It's like, no, we're not going to pay $1,500 for oil every 2 months. We have all this wood. We're going to cut our own firewood. So it's like, how can we optimize the stuff that we have, whether it's space, whether it's wood, even our time? How do we optimize that and make the most of it? We don't need to live super lavishly. We just need to be able to optimize the gifts that we have. And of course, when I reverted back to the faith, trusting in God's providence, is we have everything that we need. We might not have everything that we want, but God will give us everything we need, including the tools that we need to grow in abundance. So how can we optimize what we have to be able to do that? And it's when it comes to the farm stuff specifically, even if you don't have room for a huge sprawling garden or being able to start small with quail or meat rabbits, things that don't take a whole lot of space, but actually do provide a lot of nutritious value for the amount of footprint that they take up. So I've dabbled in both meat rabbits, quail for both eggs and meat, trying to isolate and kind of branch things off from themselves in a form of like a resource web. So being able to compost the quail manure and turning that into like a worm farm, so that way I can make high quality fertilizer, which I can then sell or use in my own garden, that sort of thing. Being able to make the most of what we have.
I talk to a lot of men on a regular basis, and this topic comes up frequently, as a desire to be a little more self-sustainable, or even just to provide more of your own food that's healthy and free of a lot of the commercial poisoning that is so common.
Absolutely.
And you touched on two animals that I think are a great solution for most people. Tell us about why you chose quail and meat rabbits.
Sure. Meat rabbits are fantastic. If you look at Europe, especially during World War II, the government actually encouraged people to grow their own backyard rabbits, because in spite of food shortages and stuff like that, rabbits breed at such a phenomenal rate that you're gonna have plenty of meat to eat. Obviously, the consideration with rabbit is it's typically too lean to be able to survive on rabbit and only rabbit, just because you need fats as well. But being able to have it grow at such an enormous rate where you have enough kits in a litter, and they're having enough litters where you are able to learn and adapt your techniques. Before you try to skin and tan your own buck hide, a male deer, if you're hunting venison, practice on rabbit hide, because there is such an abundance of it that you're able to make those mistakes and learn those actual traits. Quail takes such a small footprint. They actually like being in small enclosed spaces. So you could have a hutch that's 3 by 5 and a few tiers tall, and you could have a 3-digit amount of quail that are just as happy as can be in that short space. It's easier to maintain, so that way you don't have to get a tractor, get this, get that. You're able to have everything relatively self-contained. If you have animals, if you have kids, like I have a Saint Bernard dog, she is the love of my life, but I don't trust her around chickens running across the field and going after them. So being able to have it enclosed, being able to protect it from predators, it allows you more control over the environment, so you can learn those mistakes a little easier.
A lot of people who are getting into this kind of lifestyle, they start with chickens. That seems to just be what everybody thinks is the starting point. But as you alluded to, there are some challenges. Number one, they need space. And number two, they're not very good at defending themselves from predators.
Right.
The thing that we found is also, they take many times a year to start producing. Right, depending upon when you buy them and how old they are and what your climate is. But quail, on the other hand, start producing eggs very rapidly. Again,
8 weeks.
Yeah, depending upon the weather. But 8 weeks after birth is not uncommon, and that's an extraordinary return on investment. And again, you mentioned also they don't take up space. You don't have to give them a lot of area to roam, so you can put a bunch in a small area. And then finally, the other thing about quail that you didn't mention, but is relevant to people that are in the suburbs or the city, is the female quail make no noise.
Absolutely.
They're very quiet. And so you could have 100 quail in your backyard and nobody would even know about it. So that's pretty extraordinary. And then of course the rabbits are the same way. They're very quiet, small footprint. So you've got a great thing going there. You mentioned your soul companion, your beloved Great Bernard. So you're single. You're living a single life. Okay.
Yep. I was married, and this I am divorced. This goes into what we were talking about a little bit earlier with the brokenness of families and sometimes how we idealize those families. I do want to stress to every young Catholic man listening that it is important to marry a good Catholic woman who is going to be equally yoked. Otherwise, you're inviting a whole host of problems that shouldn't exist in your marriage. My marriage unfortunately fell apart in part to not being equally yoked in matters of faith. I was pressured to do in vitro fertilization. That's something that is staunchly, that we as Catholics oppose. And that ultimately ended up tearing the whole thing down when you have someone who's opposed to IVF and then the other person not open to adopting. And then tensions rising from that, and then having other issues that come with that importance of having that good baseline on faith and morals. That's something that you cannot compromise, and you can't flirt to convert matters of faith and morals.
Yeah, marriage is one of the most difficult things that a human being can do, right? Tying yourself to another sinner for the entirety of your life. Raising children, of course, is the only thing that would compete with that in terms of difficulty. And so if you start off, as you've alluded to here, if you start off with a different value set and with a different kind of governing principles, whether it's Catholic versus Protestant or Catholic versus anything else, then the odds of there being problems at some point in your marriage are just very, very high. And then if there's any difficulty in your life, which is guaranteed, the method by which we deal with those problems versus other faiths, it's bound to be a challenge. So I'm sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm called to the single life at this point. I'm I've been formally divorced for about half a year at this point. I'm uh, I'm taking my time with the annulment process just because I want to be able to grow from this experience. So I am taking the time to be alone and continue to develop myself. So that way I won't make the same mistake again.
Now, you touched on IVF, and I'm sorry to dwell so much on your kind of your
No, of course.
personal experiences and pain, but IVF has become a really hot topic recently, in part because the Trump administration has been, heavily promoting IVF, and it seems to be kind of a, on the surface, it seems to be a great solution for a lot of couples, but there are really significant moral problems with IVF. Do you mind sharing with us just what comes to mind for you, whether from your personal
Absolutely.
experience or just the teaching of the church, what those problems are?
Absolutely. My specific situation was unique in the form that my ex-wife lied about the ability to have children. She had a tubal salpingectomy, so they completely removed her fallopian tubes. We the only way that we would be able to conceive naturally, you could say, is IVF. Um, so the issue that comes with IVF is when they implant the embryos, uh, usually they pick the best that they could possibly put in, and the rest of the embryos are usually frozen or disposed of. As Catholics, we believe that life begins at conception. That's the pro-life stance from womb to tomb, and sometimes, it's that as soon as the sperm connects with the egg and it penetrates that, that's when life begins. So that's problem number one, is that if they're not using every single embryo, there's a problem with that. The more core reason, and the more, I guess, philosophical, spiritual reasoning, is it's commoditizing human life. It's taking the dignity, it's taking the act of creating life away from the natural means of a husband and a wife joining one another. It's taking away the gift of that unison, a husband loving his wife as Christ loves his church, and is instead having people play God and doing things in a lab. When you separate the act from the result, it creates a disordered view of life and of that gift from God.
And one of the things that I've learned about IVF recently, just in terms of the numbers that I was not familiar with before, is that it's something like 8 embryos are manufactured for every one that's implanted. Does that sound like the right ratio to you?
Yes, yeah, they usually make a batch of anywhere between 8 and 12, and they might implant 2 or 3, with the expectation that one will stick.
So heavy stuff here. We're talking
Yeah.
about for every couple that engages in this, easily looking at 8 embryos that are almost certainly going to be discarded. Another word for killed. And if it doesn't stick the first time, which is not unusual, right? Couples oftentimes go through this repeatedly before they
Yeah,
get.
they go through 3 or 4 cycles of IVF before one sticks.
Yeah, so you could have dozens of embryos, a la children, that are ultimately going to be thrown away. And so when we look at the problem of abortion, IVF potentially rivals that, just in terms of the numbers of dead children who God intended to be brought into this world and baptized, who are going to be deprived of that baptism.
Absolutely. And
Tough.
it's so sad that, because in order to be baptized, obviously, that there has to be the running of water with the Trinitarian formula. So I mean, we trust in God's mercy, but from what we know of the sacraments, um, it's a terrible loss of life that we have no control over.
Yeah, tough stuff. Okay, well, let's get back on to the conversation about the slayer of debt. And you were talking about how you help people specifically with debt. And
Yes.
we live in a debt-driven society, one that I don't know if the saints and the doctors of previous eras could have even imagined, in terms of just the normal lifestyle of a Catholic.
Mhm.
We live in truly, it's a debt-driven society, right? Your education, which congratulations to you, by the way. Before we finish the conversation, would like to hear more about the hot dog cart, and we can laugh about it, but you put yourself through college with that. Uh, let's pause briefly and talk about that. So you were the hot dog guy.
Cam the hot dog man.
And so, where did you? I know a little bit about this business. Where did you position your cart so that you would make a lot of sales?
So we had a warehouse in a city that was close to me, where I had to get a permit from the city, and obviously I had to get my food safety permits from the town and stuff like that to be able to set up for the lunch rush in front of that factory. And once you're there, for the first few days, usually it's just foot traffic. There's not a whole lot, but once people see that you're reliably there, that's when traffic kicks up and they actually start relying on you for their lunch. So you're earning their trust at their point. So it's very important that you're there. So the usual Monday through Friday I was there, but especially during the summers, this is a mobile hot dog cart, so I'd be able to go around to different concerts and venues. And up in Maine, we do weddings a little bit different. So if you're trying to cut costs, you may have a hot dog cart at your wedding. When I lived in New Hampshire when I was really young, and of course when I first came to Maine, I always thought, because we have red hot dogs up here in Maine now, we have the red snappers, and I always saw coming up to Maine, we'd see these red hot dogs, and I'd come up for a wedding, I'd assume someone was getting married, so I used to call them as a kid wedding hot dogs, but they're just red hot dogs. It's a Maine thing for sure. So being able to do different weddings and do different events and stuff like that, I would be able to move that around my school schedule, being able to have control over my work schedule so that it would align with my school. I was able to do everything full time, work full time, go to school full time, and work my way through that.
It sounds like one of the important things with that business is the right location.
Yes.
Like real estate, right? The location's everything. So can you make a living with just one factory that's given you permission to park your hot dog cart there?
Make a living. That meant something uh different about 15 years ago, because of course everything changed with COVID, so that changed the way that really all businesses and automation and food laws are constructed. You are able to survive and make a living by being consistent. I think you'll find that really with any venture, and I've had a few different businesses over the years and fun little things that have taken my attention in little projects, is that it's better to do something really well consistently than do too many things and try to jumble it all. So if you have a really good hot dog and you do nachos and chips and drinks, and you're only cooking 3 or 4 things, you'll find that your profit margins are going to be much higher if you have so many different irons in the fire, because someone once said that they want sauerkraut and someone once said that they want you to also do cookies, and someone else says that you want to do this. At that point, you're stretching everything too thin. So if you stay focused, you could absolutely make a living and survive doing what you do best.
That's great. All right, so back to the debt conversation. We live in this debt-driven society. I don't think St. Thomas Aquinas could have imagined the extent to which our very financial existence is driven by debt, starting with, of course, the Federal Reserve creating money, loosely defined money, Federal Reserve notes, out of nothing.
Yeah, it's not tied to gold, not tied to anything.
Yeah. So which in itself, kind of we're starting from ground zero with a usury problem,
Yes.
but so the debt is created there, and then we all get paid in that those dollars, which are really just debt. And then in order to live, whether it's go to college, buy a car, buy a house, in many cases, just finance a typical way of living, debt is required for that. The Bible certainly doesn't speak very well of being the debtor. Um, what do you do to help people with that problem?
Absolutely. So but part of solving the problem begins with not being a part of the problem. So I work with people who are in debt, so the last thing I do is want to put them in further debt. So if they want to work one-on-one with me, I've got options that vary on accountability. Like most of my things are free, honestly. So I have an online community where we do our different prayer groups. We have our financial literacy courses. We have the peer accountability through that. We have the different giveaways based off of charitable contributions and debt payoff. All of that is free. The only thing that I charge money for is if I'm getting involved in the accountability aspect. So being able to have a plan that fits each individual person's budget and having scholarship opportunities available on top of that, I don't want people going into debt to work with me. Even if your budget is zero, I'll have something for you to help you move the needle and actually start working your way out of that. So the first part of solving the problem is not being part of the problem yourself. And then of course tying in our faith into it, that we aren't meant to, we can't properly serve God if we are being distracted by owing all these different masters things, right? I have one master, his name is Jesus Christ. So by taking our blinders off to each of these individual debtors and taking a look at our finances through a 30,000-foot view, I call this my valiant virtue method, and looking at each line of our spending and looking at our habits with our spending and say, is this a necessary purchase? Is this a necessity? Is this like my mortgage? Is this a utility payment? Or is it something that has some discretion? If it is discretionary, is it feeding vice, or is it virtuous, or is it somewhere in the middle? And then truly being able to isolate our budget down to what's a necessity, and then of that, what is actually fueling our drive towards goodness, or what is detracting from it. We know if there's a cash flow problem, the first thing that we should probably cut down are some of those vices. Then being able to, once every dollar is accounted for, being able to then focus that money on slaying your dragons one at a time. Depending on the debt avalanche method or the debt snowball method, there's so many different ways to skin a cat. Pick one and pick one well. And what works for you is going to be different for other people. The different tools that you use are going to be different from other people. The best tool that you use is one that you will consistently use, and the best method is the one that you'll stick to. So I meet with everyone for free to come up with a comprehensive battle plan to really decide, isolate what is the best path forward, and how are you going to stick to it? What tactics are you going to use to actually slay that dragon?
When you work with people, what do you find in terms of the problem that's driving the debt? Are most people just financially illiterate? And I say that not with, not being condescending. Some of the worst people I know with money are physicians. Doctors are notorious about being bad financial managers. But so is it financial illiteracy? Is it spending? What, a lot of people are in debt. Is it necessarily because they've got a problem, or is that just the American lifestyle? What's going on there?
I think it starts, they start at a disadvantage based on what they're being told in public schools, that everyone needs to go to college, everyone needs to get a degree, everyone needs to move a million miles away from their family to go to one of these big cities to get a minimum wage job and pay $2,000 a month rent. That's just the way that life is, when this is a relatively recent idea that you're supposed to move away from family. You know, you used to have several generations living under one roof, and you know, you didn't have to pay for daycare because you know grandma was going to watch the kids. You didn't have to pay for long-term care for great grandma when her health starts to decline, because you know that mom is also going to help, you know, pick up some of the slack with that. You didn't have two car payments because you only needed one car. This sort of changing of the American landscape, to push this sort of individualism that everyone needs to go off and pave their own course, and it's totally normal to go into debt, and that you're doing the right thing by doing this. People are starting at a disadvantage and they're graduating with a ton of debt. Then you have the keeping up with the Joneses social pressure that comes with that, especially for those people, just like you said, who are in professional positions, right? They're professionals. They pride themselves in being professionals. They have to appear professional, right? So there's that aspect of it. And then when you do have this hustle mentality, this Protestant work ethic that you hear of, all that you need to do is move, 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 move. So that way you could pay for this, pay for this, pay for this. Well, then when you do finally burn out and you maybe don't have the same rational thought processes because you're so burnt out, you say, oh, well, I'm just going to treat myself. And that's when the spending really kicks in, is once people hit that burnout and you're able to justify certain financial decisions that your bank account, if you look at it, isn't able to be justified. So it's a combination of all those factors. I think people start out financially illiterate, and then they just get burnt out as time goes on.
Yeah. I always ask business owners, who's not a good fit for working with you, because not everybody is a good fit, right?
No, and I have signed on some clients who I regret signing on, because if you're not willing to change the habits, if you're not willing to change the micro decisions of your life, then you can't expect your macro decisions to change. So if you want something that's like done for you, or something that's just going to like wipe your debt overnight, that's not what this program is. This program is designed to change the way that you think about money, to remove your emotional attachment to money, so that way you see money as a tool to be optimized. It's a gift from God. We need to make sure that's being spent properly, that it's being stewarded correctly. I've been bitten before, because I have a 90 days to slay or I fight without pay guarantee for my 3-month program, where if you don't see reasonable financial change with your cash flow after month 3, then I'll work for you for free until you do. Well, I have some people who I've signed on that just aren't putting in the effort. You know, they might schedule 1 or 2 meetings with me, and I'm chasing them around trying to get stuff done, and then month 3 runs around and they go, all right, so you're going to keep working for me for free in perpetuity, right? And it's like, well, no, because you didn't do your part. You haven't fulfilled your end of the bargain of, this is a joint effort. I'm the Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder. You can't flick Jiminy Cricket off and then expect things to go your way. You need to actually follow the program. So I am very selective about who I work with, especially for that 3-month program, because it's such a hassle and such a commitment on my end, to make sure that people are doing what they need to do.
So what are some of those key things that you look for somebody that's going to do well with your program? And 90 days, to make any meaningful change in 90 days is pretty extraordinary. What do they need to bring to the table?
They need to be willing to actually look at their finances. I've had so many people who will like send me a PDF of their bank statement, and they're like, oh, so if you could sort through this and make me a budget. It's like, no, this is your budget. I'm showing you how to make a budget appropriately. I'm showing you, here's what I'd recommend doing. But if you don't have buy-in with your own budget, you're gonna work for it. It's not gonna work for you, and then you're gonna quit. We see this with spouses all the time, where the person who's ready to make a change with their budget will completely redo the budget. They'll tell their wife, this is what we're doing. And then the other person doesn't have buy-in, they're not going to follow it. It's going to fall apart. Just like in when any aspect of marriage need to be equally yoked. And that's something that we see with our finances too. So if you're ready to get your finances together, but your spouse isn't, then the program might not work for you either. There is a certain, especially being a Catholic man, where you're supposed to lead your family. So sometimes that means having a conversation with your wife about spending. If you're afraid to have that conversation with your wife, you're not leading her, you're enabling her. So it's making sure that we are leading our families, that we are actually willing to make the changes to change your life, because you don't fall into debt overnight. It's not going to take overnight to get rid of it.
Do you ever work with groups, like do a program for the entire parish, or for another religious organization where you work with the group and not just the individuals?
Yes. Yep. So I offer group coaching as well. I offer it. I have group coaching instead of one-on-one coaching. I make it cost. I round down to whatever Netflix is charging. I'm always $1 less than that. So that way, there's no justification for why you can't afford it if you also have a Netflix subscription. But I work with groups, and we focus on more of that financial literacy aspect, open discussion as far as, hey, I'm facing this, or hey, we all seem to have this specific issue around this particular money habit, like eating out. I do partner with different organizations up in the state of Maine, with different parishes, where I will offer them services as a group. One of the partnerships that I've just recently established is with one of the pro-life centers that we have up here in the state of Maine, for women who feel pressured into an abortion because of financial reasons. I'm able to do group coaching with those at no charge, so that way we could find a way out of this, so they don't feel like aborting their baby is the only way that they're going to thrive financially. I work a lot with the Knights of Columbus. I'm the membership director for the state of Maine. So I work a lot with the Knights, with financial literacy with the Knights, making sure that my fellow Knights are being taken care of. So I work with them quite a bit. So I'm able to do a lot more than just one-on-one if there's a broad portion of the population that has a similar need, because if you have everyone at all different stages, group coaching isn't really going to be super effective. But for more of a homogeneous population, it works a lot better.
Yeah, I would think working with Catholic schools, Catholic colleges would be another opportunity for you to educate a lot of people who are almost certainly in a bad position, or headed in a bad position, in terms of taking on debt before they're even making a lot of money.
Yes. Yeah, that's something that we see a lot in colleges, and I work with a lot of the college students up in my area who have unsubsidized loans, and they're not working through college. They're just kind of partying and doing this and that and the other thing, and they're taking like 4 or 5 classes a semester, so they still have time. And they're just letting that interest accrue during the time that they're enrolled. And it's like, well, you could at least be paying that down, so that way when you do graduate, you're not going to have this whole mountain of debt.
Yeah, absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground today. Any final words you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I would just say, whatever you do with your finances, just remember that it's not our money to begin with. This is where we're called to stewardship. So whatever you do with your money, make sure that you have that in mind first and foremost.
How can people reach you?
People can reach out to me on my email, Cameron, Cameron at slayersofdebt.com. My Instagram is cameron.financial, and my website is www.slayersofdebt.com.
Cameron, keep up the great work, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having me.
Peace be with you.
God bless.